The real story behind why I joined Privy was I used Friendtech and just had never used an embedded wallet before. You probably used an app that's like sign in with Privy. You may know it or not, but essentially what we do is like an authentication library to onboard all of your users. So I was like, how is this like being built? Like what's the team behind this? And went deep into Friendtech and then realized like Friendtech was partnering with Privy to power this embedded wallet experience. And then I contacted Privy and felt like they were doing some really exciting things, both in onboarding, but then just as like a company and as like a vision of like what crypto could be, what onboarding could be.
Welcome to Tech Around and Find Out, your go-to weekly dive into the biggest trends and real stories shaking up the crypto world. Disclaimer, nothing on this show is financial or investment advice. NFA. Always do your own research and consult any licensed professionals before making any decisions. Now let's dive right in and find out what's happening this week. Hey Jamie, it's an awesome honor to have you, and I think we've talked about this for a bunch of different times of would we listen to a podcast if we'd be able to have some special guests. So I'm lucky to have you as a special guest, and this podcast as something we're still trying to build up, but quite excited to hear a bit more from you, Jamie, on all things that we're looking at in crypto. Obviously, we've spent quite a lot of time behind the scenes in crypto already for this many years. But I think one of the things that is one of the mementos I want to take away from my own crypto career, and I think similarly I've heard a lot of the same takeaways from others, is that we do want to obviously make a difference in the space and leave the whole market as something that we can look back and say we've really delivered something. Obviously, all of our time in this space is something that has been very non-linear as well in terms of the impact that has come out of the time that we spent. A lot of it is the toil behind the scenes. But now looking forward, obviously would love to hear a little bit more from you on all of your contributions and the things that you've been able to cover inside Privy. And now looking forward, given the current state of the market, would love to hear a little bit more on what gives us real fundamental hope, I think, is the users and the builders that are getting real volume and real traction for their businesses. And I think that you sit at a really awesome place to be able to not only see, but also guide these project teams that are truly, when everyone says the onboarding the real world and onboarding the next million users or billion users, I think you guys are truly doing it. So a lot of things to cover today, and really looking forward to hear a lot more from you. Welcome, Jamie.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks for having me. Excited to chat and dive in. As you mentioned, I've been around a couple of different places and seen a lot in crypto over, I think now like 7 years. And I always joke that crypto years are like dog years. So there's
Multiply
many more than.
Yeah, so I think maybe for those of the audience that are a little bit less familiar with what Privy is, I think would love to let you get to tell us, from the angle first actually of, wow, why did you join Privy? Because I think you were a highly sought after free agent thinking about your next steps back then, and that this was one of the, I think, really exciting options that you had on the table.
I think the real story behind why I joined Privy was I used Friendtech and just had never used an embedded wallet before. I had mostly worked at centralized exchanges and obviously had used wallets, typical seed phrase wallets before, and then I'd done a lot of work in custody, whether it be like just wallets, working on Cash App, doing everything from like wallets to like full cold storage, really institutional custody as well. And I felt like when I signed up for Friendtech, it was the first time I had like an aha moment in crypto in a little while, and just really reinvigorated me and like what we could build and how we could onboard more people. And so I was like, how is this like being built? Like what's the team behind this? And went deep into Friendtech and then realized like Friendtech was partnering with Privy to power this embedded wallet experience. And then I contacted Privy and felt like they were doing doing some really exciting things, both in onboarding, but then just as like a company and as like a vision of like what crypto could be, what onboarding could be. And so that's kind of like the story was basically like this rabbit hole I went down after French launched. But yeah, I have mostly worked at like centralized exchanges. And so this is like the first time I've worked at, truly a SaaS startup. But for context, for folks who aren't as familiar with Privy, you probably use an app that's like sign in with Privy. You may know it or not, but essentially what we do is like an authentication library to onboard all of your users. So whether you sign up for an app with like a phone number like you can with Blackbird, or even whether you sign up with a wallet like you do on Crypto the Game. So Privy basically powers all of those experiences. What we really feel like Privy is like the easiest way to have onboarding into your app. So we power like a bunch of different applications, but we just focus on making the developer experience for how you get your users like into your app and like engaging with your app first. That's like what we focus on, and yeah, it's been around for like 3 years now, and yeah, continuing to grow.
Yeah, I feel for me the most exciting part is exactly what you said. There's so many apps that we know uh, that use Privy in order to allow us to onboard. At the same time, there's actually so many more that we probably didn't even feel it. And I think that's exactly what you said of the aha moment that honestly, a lot of people still, I don't think they realize how hard crypto is for normies still, right? But in order to be able to build something that is truly scalable, I think it needs to do that. And I think reverse engineering our exchange experience, I think lowering the barriers to entry for all the apps that we have is necessary because there's still reasons why the centralized exchanges are the shelling points of crypto. They're the ones that have tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of users and downloads. And right now, we still are magnitudes away for a lot of the DeFi and on-chain apps that we want to have. So at least let's not lose the users at the top of the funnel, even when we're getting them to sign it, right? And I think on a builder side, it's been really interesting to see a lot of builders who truly, I think, want to innovate on other parts of the stack, not just the onboarding part. So that for them to have something that's standard and user friendly makes it actually really powerful for them not to have to worry about this part. So I think it's everyone talked about modular blockchains, but I'm actually really excited about just modular building. And in a way, if I don't have to think about this part, I think that already lowers the friction as a builder myself to think about what do I need to do to properly onboard and serve a user on my platform. So I think wanted to cover a little bit more as well, as we've actually chatted a bit about some of the games as well that have been using Privy. I think a lot of people get a lot of pushback on, what's the value of gaming in crypto. But at least I think it's worthwhile to quantify the stats on some of the onboarding that truly can be done. Obviously, not all data that you have is shareable, but would love to hear what types of stats or things could you kind of highlight as some of the success cases where you're seeing Privy move the needle a ton on what truly can be onboarded.
Yeah, there's so many amazing games that are building with Privy, and gaming in general has all of these cool subgenres that are really interesting to like dive into. Being like not a gaming person and being more like a crypto person, yeah, we've seen really high quality teams like come to Privy and say, hey, we have this game and we feel like it's such an obvious jump for the in-game currency to like be cryptocurrency. It's just like so obvious, I think, to all of us who've worked in crypto, like, and who maybe play video games growing up. But yeah, I mean, a great example of this is Proof of Play. They have like a they built the original Zynga like Farmville games, and they built this game called Pirate Nation, and it's pretty fun to play. But also when they just like do announcements in their Discord, I'm like hopping in there, like making sure like like, hey, like okay, they're gonna announce that they're using Privy, like what is this gaming community like gonna think about Privy? And the Discord was like, we're so excited, like they're using Privy, this is gonna be so much easier. Like the whole game is on chain, but it's super fast and smooth, and they have this amazing community that they built around it. So that's like I would say like one of the examples that comes to mind first is just this Pirate Nation game, because people love it and it has this big community around it. We've done a couple other like unique things for games. So we built a feature called like guest accounts where you can just like sign up, start playing a game, and then you don't really have to like sign up with a wallet or like authenticate until maybe you have like earned some in-game currency. And so like features like that we're trying to build with these games are really cool to see. There's just like a lot of unique aspects to them. Like we built a Unity SDK to try to like focus on like these games that are like super super deep on chain, building with that tech. But tons of other fun like little games. Like obviously the B3 team has done a lot. Arcade.fun, tons of different games where like you can really even like the Atari games where you can like play games you played from your childhood, but now they're crypto enabled. And then, as you know, I've been like very deep down a rabbit hole of Telegram games and, chatting with different like bots and kind of like playing a game that way. I also think there's just this really interesting aspect of so many crypto apps like feeling like a game. Yapster is kind of a game, but it's very different as a game. It's like a social game. A crypto the game is very different than like a proof of play or like a truly on chain like Call of Duty or something game, which we also have those types of customers building on chain or building with Privy. So I think the gaming sector has like so many genres, but yeah, it's been cool to see a couple of like examples of people who have really built communities. And I think like B3, Pirate Nation, like Anomaly, a couple of good examples, but there's tons more too.
I think I'm lucky that you've already shared a lot of these. So I think the alpha on this front is unbounded in terms of the data that you guys get to see with all of these teams. I'm actually also curious to dive a bit deeper into specifically what you said about the experiences on the social side as well. When we're seeing obviously the original kind of use case that I think put Privy on the map for many regular users was the friend tech experience, like you mentioned. And then now seeing obviously Yaps and this trend of InfoFi come up as well. I think the interesting thing for me is also to see for you guys in terms of how you've been able to actually be a part of a lot of the narratives that we've heard in the last, let's say, year or so, be it from the Telegram mini app side of things. You guys have some of these teams that are also building on Solana, some on Base. Each of the ecosystems that stuff is happening, fundamentally you're seeing it reflected in your user accounts and all of the experiences that you guys are managing as part of supporting all these projects. And I think I really love that the mindset is how to co-build these experiences, right? So for those in the audience who are a little bit less familiar with the logic that Jamie mentioned before, if a user hasn't yet accumulated some crypto or some tokens in an account inside the game, then maybe he doesn't need a dedicated account or doesn't yet need to upgrade from some sort of burner experience until he has something that he needs to save a value. So from a efficiency perspective, being able to say, hey, I don't need to create something for you yet, but if you do come back, then we can make sure that we have everything saved for you. And then as a really efficient and elegantly designed type of account system that reflects the reality that not every player comes back to play a game. Sometimes they're just here to kill time. Sometimes they're just here to try something. Sometimes they're just here to play one thing with a friend one time, right? But I think that to enable these types of experiences and allow for a wider set of people that are addressable, I guess, in the sense as a user playing these games in a crypto environment. I'm really excited to see that level of depth because, to be honest, I think you sell yourself short when you say a SaaS business for Privy, because I think the level of depth that you guys end up doing with a lot of these teams that use your services goes, I think, a lot further than what the industry normally hears about for any SaaS players.
Yeah, it's really everything from, wallets to identity. And, that's what we're trying to like, push forward is like, what is your, what is your experience going to be like the first time you sign up for an app? But then like, as you use all of these different apps and as, all these different apps use Privy, like what could your experience be like across apps as well? Yeah, and so it's been fun. I think like gaming is one that we've seen like consistently be talked about, but it is always fun to kind of like see a little bit of the next narratives, like even with the AI narrative that was kind of happening like in the last 6 months. We saw a couple of teams that were like starting to build an AI, and then I've kind of like seen that trajectory as well. Obviously, like Virtual Sapien, tons of cool teams building and AI, like Graphane. So it's been interesting to sort of see like the newer folks you're talking to. You're like, okay, like is this what's going to be next? And I think like Privy's lucky to have that bird's eye view, and then to be able to hopefully like connect a lot of those wallets across across those different apps and say like, hey, what if you could take your wallet from this app to this app? Like, would you guys want to talk about that? If you could take your assets from one game to another, it's such an obvious like thing that you would want to be able to do, right? I think like I always talk about the gaming example of like originally wasn't that one of the reasons why Vitalik like invented Ethereum? Was he was just
Yeah.
like very upset at the creators of WoW, and so that's like the problem that we're kind of still trying to solve, haven't yet.
Yeah, for me, I'm still angry. All of my progress in every sport game ever, when it releases the 2026 version, I can't do anything with all of my old points. So
Yeah,
I think we're all reliving a bit of this. Um, but I think
awesome.
moving forward, I want to also hear a little bit more on, given the bird's eye view vantage point that you
Yeah.
get at Privy, are there any sectors, challenges, or things that you think are going to be paramount? I saw Twitter fights recently of people talking about ZK tag scaling. But yeah, happy to hear anything that you think is pressing that maybe people aren't yet aware of.
Yeah, I would say, maybe not like pressing issues to solve, but I think one I think interesting, I would say like challenge and or opportunity that's coming is the, proliferation of like app chains. We see this a lot, and have worked closely with a lot of teams who have maybe started building an app and then realized like we want to have our own chain. We support like Hyperliquid and like B3, like I mentioned, Abstract being like a really big one that has an ecosystem of different applications, and kind of like started with a community, but then ended up building an L2 and ultimately like a super bespoke wallet experience. Abstract did a great job making sure that like you could bring the Abstract wallet to a bunch of other different apps. But I think figuring out like how all of these different app chains and all of these different ecosystems are going to connect in the future is still something that like we're trying to figure out. And yeah, there's tons of other like exciting new narratives as well. I feel like with stablecoins, that's definitely something that at one point felt like it was just a narrative, but is really really coming to fruition. People are excited about like low level wallet architecture that you can just like enable payments anywhere, which obviously is also one of the reasons I got into crypto is like wanting to work for a company like like an exchange, and saying like you could just send money anywhere and you could kind of like trade anything. I think like stable coins are definitely, we're seeing that like as a trend of what people are finally excited about building. So yeah, the app chains are interesting, and I think similarly everyone wants to build their own stablecoin, and so then figuring out like liquidity across different chains is going to be, I think, a fun challenge, but I think it's all doable.
I like all of these angles, and I think we have a lot of things to talk more on both of these. But I think I'll start maybe from abstract side. Obviously, as you mentioned, the already existing community in terms of Pudgy has a great shelling point to launch an ecosystem around. But I think it's a great example where Privy plugs into something that, to be honest, I wouldn't say has a tech strength. It has a community strength, and the job is how to then build the right tech around that experience. And I think that is a really valuable position to be in, as well as a necessary position to bring the tech to where the users are. So I think a lot of my own app chain thoughts is that if there are teams that have already figured out the distribution problems, which crypto has an abundant amount of issues on this one, then the question is, how can we give them the best tech and the best experiences around some of the users that they already have? I've seen this in the Asia side with the way the exchange wallets have built their wallets experiences around the fact that they have the signups of this KYC centralized exchange users first. And I think in a DeFi setting, or at least on-chain self-custody setting. That's actually something that you guys have been able to kind of fill the gap in. So really love that. I think on the app chain side, I've been also looking a little bit deeper into Initia and their structures of, I think they're called minitias, these mini app chains where they'll be incentivizing more teams to go and build products on top. Want to give a shout out to Jink, one of my good friends who has been challenging me to think a lot about this, because I think that the interesting thing is that in new ecosystems, the games are often the ones that truly can get some traction and usage. And so this may or may not be a type of alpha, but I think that generally speaking, games are easier to build up communities than it is to get PVL to a new chain because of the bridging, because of the stable coins, all the frictions here on this front. That ultimately, a lot of times we see games as the kickstart to the ecosystems that we see. So as we look at some of the new token launches and new chain launches that we are seeing, like in Monad, for example, Impossible is an investor in Sparkball, one of the console games on Monad. We have another gaming infra team, Play Network, who is actually also getting some of the mini apps that maybe half a year ago would have been going to Telegram mini apps are now actually Monad native experiences. And I think that we're seeing a lot of these teams jump at the opportunities to be the, let's call it showcased dApps, that when the users are already there, but the TVL isn't yet, what do these users do in the meantime? So I think this is actually very, very much tied to your question on the stablecoin point. That I guess a first bluntest question is, do you think stablecoins need community, or do they, like when you say community of stablecoin users, it's just like people that accept this unit of denomination, right? But do you need to do more to get people's trust into a stablecoin than to get users' trust to hodl an NFT or a PFP or whatever it might be? I don't know. I've never thought about this question. Happy to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, it's a great question. I don't think there's going to be a Discord where everyone is just hype about, this stablecoin is going to be the number one thing, and we're all so excited about that. Maybe because there's not going to be some financial incentive, or maybe because maybe because it's really hard to build a community around a piece of tech specifically. I think you can build a community around like, a lot of different things. Just passion for one, topic or one like piece of art. Like I think Azuki is a great example of like, people who are super passionate about anime are like in the Azuki community, but maybe not as involved in the rest of crypto. And there's like, a bunch of different reasons why people will join a community, but it's mostly shared interest. And people aren't super passionate about the existing banking system. There's like, I wouldn't say any communities about dollars in general. I don't know, maybe like the citizens of the United States are just the community of the dollar, I guess. I think it is more less about community and like more about trust, right? Like, if you take the example of like, okay, well, who's the community of the US dollar? Like, I guess it's citizens. It doesn't really matter. Like they're just like wanting it to be trusted. They're not like, wanting their bags to go up. They're not wanting like a bunch of changes to be made. In fact, maybe the opposite. And there's not this same like mechanisms of like, hey, we have this feedback for you to change this thing. It's like, does it work? And am I gonna, is it gonna like decrease in value? So yeah, super different, I think, in terms of like needing a community for stablecoins, or needing needing tech versus needing like feedback from users. I think the biggest thing is like, yeah, trust. Like I think you're seeing that with global regulation, and even those of us who have spent time abroad and then coming back to the US, like seeing how different people treat Tether. I think there is like a user community of Tether, but it's not like people are like in the chat like, oh yeah, like we need to have Tether everywhere. I mean, it's like it just works. But coming to the US, a lot of people in the US, like they really don't trust Tether. They've like heard certain things about it. And for better or worse, don't trust it. And you might see in the future, a piece of regulation that says like, hey, it can't be Tether because X things have happened. And I think like a lot of lessons like will be learned from whether like Tether wins or not, because there's not really a community around it. But it's has worked for such a long time. And so like maybe just the tech and the trust is more important. Because in the when we were all trading on like Poloniex, like Tether was the most trustworthy thing in the market, and maybe maybe there's something else now, like people trust USDC more, or some third secret thing that comes.
Yeah, I think I saw Balaji tweet the 7-year anniversary of
Yeah.
USDC video a bit ago. But I think you touched on a lot of really interesting points on this one. So I want to recap, I think, my biggest one out of your points here. Um, the reality is, I think it is harder to build a community around something that has, unfortunately or fortunately, price expectation to go up. You highlight the kind of, let's call it, risk aversion that people have when they have an asset that is not just a medium of exchange, but also a store of value, which obviously the dollar has not been able to stave off inflation over its inception, right? So I think the expectations that people have is very different from what people truly want to be able to deliver. And that in terms of having a asset that people can rally around, I do think that the stablecoin side is actually going to maybe proliferate even more. Is it's easier to have somebody come up with a new thing. Who knows? Maybe you'll have Jamie USD in next week, right? But in terms of this, I'm starting to think about how can this be all tied back together. It doesn't make sense to have gaming alliances accept a shared stablecoin of sorts, like USDG for gaming.
Yeah.
Is this going to be one of the years where, if it's easier to convince community to stick around because of some, let's call it, capital controls, for lack of a better word, but around something that is designed for risk prevention, is this going to be a new way that people can create community around something that just works, right? I've noticed this in, for example, the own game, the regular Web2 games that I play, like how many of them are titles issued by the same brands, and that effectively you can buy credit or other things from the parent company to get in-game items, whatever it might be. And the question of, in terms of, in this whole stablecoin side of things, is this the ultimate answer that we can give to the quote unquote we're building fundamental things camp of crypto? Because I think that for a lot of the builders, I think the memes, all these other things have definitely been uh, a distraction at the least, and maybe a turn off from working in the space at the worst. That is the stablecoin angle, the piece that everyone feels good about, because builders no longer want to defend against whether or not the token goes up or down. We just say, does it work or not? Is like a binary outcome that we feel we're more in control in. So we'd love to hear from the, let's call it, builder hat perspective that you've got on this, of, does this make you feel like this is a meaningful thing to do in the space? And then on the user side, on the adoption side, would love to hear both perspectives.
Yeah, I think my perspective on, timeline first is, having been in crypto for now 7-8 years and seen stable coins like grow and really like from their, inception, it felt like to me the last year that everyone was talking about stable coins. All of a sudden, when those of us who have been around for a while have like always known that this is an obvious use case. I think even Bitcoiners will use, international remittance payments as like a reason for why crypto should exist. So I've felt honestly like the last like year or something a bit of a like, we would like, where have you been, like where have haven't you been like looking around? Like of course stablecoins are useful, of course they're better. And so it's like in some ways boomer of me to kind of be like, this is always obvious, but I'm super excited that everyone is hype about it now. Like I don't think it's just a narrative. There are really awesome builders who are finally going to get into crypto. I think there's going to be like fintech players and like TradFi people that they just finally get crypto. And whether those are folks who are building like just payments apps, or whether they're building like new banking services. I think like the next era is going to be like, okay, all these folks who maybe we're a bit scared to like get into crypto. Like basically we swung the pendulum so far to meme coins that people were like, okay, whatever that is, I don't want that. And now we're like, okay, stable coins make sense. And now we're in this building phase of, building just with stable coins. And I think all of these awesome builders who like maybe wouldn't have, maybe would have built in fintech, are going to build on stable coins. And even like a couple of years ago, I just felt like imagine being in fintech and not building on stable coins. It just always felt like very silly to me. But then what I think is going to happen in the next couple of years, like if I had to predict is that, then there's going to be this, increase of value that's like on chain, that's in stable coins. Then it's like, well, how do you put that to use, right? If someone is, it's basically like recreating the banking system in a way. It's like, well, dollars sitting in bank can't do anything. And so then I think there will be like this eventual reversion to something else. And maybe it's not, meme coins, but maybe it's like the more, the more kind of like in the background side of DeFi, right? It's like the APY that's not 100%, 110%, but it's like, blending out your stable coins now that you have those on chain, and kind of like using that value that's going to be like created by this next sort of like stablecoin cycle, to either like use new apps or to earn yield or like kind of repower like a new DeFi summer era after that. Because I think like it would be great if stablecoins were all of our payment rails, but then I think there's obviously like a next step after that of like, okay, well, now that a bunch of people are on chain, like what can they do with this, and what like new experiences can they have?
Yeah, I'm gonna call DeFi Renaissance 2026. Can we say it? Can we say that? That's not a price prediction, right, team?
That's not a
I
price
think we'll
tag.
be
I feel like,
okay.
yeah, maybe
NFA.
2027.
So I think totally agree with you on this, and I think especially given that, um, like you said, going back to your boomer point, I think it's right. Like in my mind, I sat here and I said, well, look, we've had Terra, we've had even Justin Sun built a stablecoin 2 years ago. Like we're already we've already seen some of these, good and bad, but I think especially with Athena, I think doing fairly well over the last couple of years as well, despite the market not having many other quote unquote C DeFi or DeFi growths. That this at least has been something that has shown to people that people do demand a unit of accounts that they can use, right? And I think looking forward, we're going to see more of that across multiple chains. And that if there's going to be more and more of these communities onboarding, I think there's just natural that more and more of them will demand the same utilities. So it's interesting that I think the two things that you see growing in the years to come, I think they're very aligned with each other, and in fact may help even create the success cases of the other ones. Like I really could see pudgy users using a USDP or whatever it might be, right? And it's effectively, even if it's as simple as redeemable as a Walmart gift card to buy pudgies, it still could be something that I can see, right? So I think longer term, excited to see some of these. I think, Jamie, you've shared us a lot of intel or insights on what you see moving forward as well. I'd love to actually ask you if you have a question of what you think, what is on your mind, or what are some of the things that are keeping you up at night.
Yeah, well, I think with stable coins in general, like we have such a US perspective of,
Mm.
stable coins almost feel synonymous with, $1. Is that how you feel like people in other parts of the world are like sensing it? Like, do you feel like those two words are becoming interchangeable? And like ultimately, is that good? Like, is this like level of stablecoin like nationalism good or not?
Mm. So I'll put on two hats for this question. It's a great question. First will be my being based in Asia and having a lot of teammates spread out across Asia hat, and then the second hat I'll wear is the economics major
Yeah.
hat. That point of view is, I think, another relevant one. Um, for the Because we have teammates based now, I believe, in 9 different Asian countries. The reality is that this stablecoin use case is also relevant for all of them to do business with each other as well. That like people in Thailand, for example, will know that the Taiwanese dollar is relatively close to market price. It's like the unit of denomination is close. So when Taiwanese tourists come to Taiwan, they look at the number and they just pretend it's the same. They don't even do the 0.92 conversion or whatever it might be. And then they say, oh well, I guess 7-Eleven said this bottle of water is 10, but for their unit of account, there's actually a 7% difference, right? From a payments perspective, if I told you had a 7% fee either direction, you'd think about it, right? But for the regular user on a day to day, they see a number, they do a rough calculation, and say, yeah, I guess that's reasonable. And I think that's actually a lot of the way that the world thinks about currencies, and why the dollar has not only been just simply a unit of account because it's been quote unquote stable. It is actually the easier thing where people remember a particular exchange rate for a certain period of time, right? And so they'll be like, oh, I didn't realize, the Canadian dollar moved this way or the euro moved this way, right? In that sense, I think that we have a lot of business in the world that's already global or multinational, and that in reality, it doesn't matter what unit of account is being used, but they need something that truly has the payment rails parts of this. And I would say that that is also one of the things of why I see the Solana ecosystem spending a lot of time in the PayFi narrative. And I think that they're actively finding some high quality founders, as what you mentioned, of trying to get people that otherwise would be just quote unquote a fintech founder. And can you get those types of people to build amazing on-chain experiences? Because the biggest, I think, benefit as a builder for building something in crypto is being able to have a borderless user base from day one. And I think that if you can get this type of user bootstrapping for these types of builders, it is enticing for you to try to get global from day one, rather than I need to get test users in a sandbox of this whatever country's regulations, so on and so forth. I think that mindset is definitely something that moves the needle a ton for the, let's call it, talent acquisition into our space. And I think that especially given the heavy efforts that I've seen in some ecosystems like Solana push in this payments direction, I do think that the payment side of things is going to definitely become a more robust sector. I would actually tie this also then to RWAs, because the store of value / unit of accounts problem is actually something that I'll put aside medium of exchange, because I think we all understand crypto can be sent everywhere, and that's one of the awesome parts of it. But on the other two use cases of what we call money, right? Unit of account and store of value, often real estate in the real world or commodities, all these things that we crypto people call real world assets. These RWAs, I think, also have a different type of, I think, recognition or legitimacy across different geographies, right? For me, it's still mind blowing that an apartment in Thailand that has all the best amenities that I could imagine is probably still 1/10 or 1/20th the cost of other places. That square footage is not actually something that's 1-to-1, which economically it makes sense why it's not equal. But from a utility perspective, we realize that the most tangible thing that we go home to every day, 1 square foot is not 1 square foot. And so the question is, like, how do we kind of understand that, and how do we build ecosystems knowing that people value places differently? For me, this past Christmas, being able to go to Japan and spend some time in, let's say, the less crowded areas of Japan, to be able to see and understand a bit of these akiyas, these quote unquote undervalued apartments in the countryside that are slowly being abandoned as more people move to the city. That when you have this type of demand and supply imbalance, then you have, and also an aging workforce that's making it more expensive to maintain these houses, that then you have increasing costs in the future to maintain a house, right? And I think the mindset of, is a house a store of value, is something that I think we grow up as Americans, like very ingrained, the white picket fence outside type of dream. But then when you look at actually the reality of the rest of the world, actually people are condensing into a lot of the major cities and leaving behind fundamentally valuable land or valuable space that they could be capturing value in, right? And for me, this kind of ties to the core question of uh, what is seen as a true store of value. For me, it's very interesting that Japan doesn't view houses as necessarily value accrual, but rather because the rest of the world measures rent and measures these income streams as something that denotes a true free cash flow model that you could measure for these properties. But then you can also see where if the maintenance costs are high, that the correct modeling of how to think about a property is actually much more akin to how the Western world depreciates cars. Once you drive it off the lot, it's already depreciating in value. So I think the whole problems that we see inside stablecoins, inside real world assets, inside anything we tokenize is this thing when tokenized able to achieve a greater addressable market? And is it actually easier to maintain or more expensive to maintain? If we turn holding, for example, my parents' basement still has a crap ton of my baseball cards that I collected as a kid. Are NFTs valuable? Well, I would say one of the value of digital NFTs is that I get to take my collection anywhere. So therefore, it is actually quote unquote easier to maintain. So right now, my baseball cards are a liability sitting in my parents' basement. So that means they cannot rent out that basement. And meanwhile, I've got things that sit in my wallet, right, or maybe in my Privy wallet. So in terms of trying to be able to have a experience that lowers the barriers to entry to maintain, I think that will be the key question that all of these assets on either stablecoin, real world assets, or even the mental friction to stick on another new chain that a new app chain that someone builds. I think the real questions are we getting convenience out of it? If we're getting convenience out of it, I think there will be sticking value there. If it's something where we think of it as an additional hassle, it will eventually depreciate itself. And I think as we think about that, what are the things that we can do as builders to position for the products that we think actually can accumulate value around these communities? And as you said, the talent point, the AI threat to crypto, and I say threat in a loving way, but I call it a threat specifically because I think a lot of the smartest people I know are arguably more challenged by the tech problems that AI presents and the human problems that AI presents. And that's lured away a lot of the, let's call it, bright-eyed thinkers that I thought would be able to change the world via crypto. But at the same time, I think we have to be realistic that not everyone's just going to care about the tool by which they want to change the world. The great people will change the world however they can change it. And I think that in that sense, a lot of my thoughts around what can be done on the payment side of things and what can be done on the stablecoin side of things is also the root of, can we convince the regular world regulators and all these guys to finally be a bit more progressive? If this is the, let's call it Goldilocks, maybe the Bitcoins and Ethereums of the world were too small and maybe are too big of a DeFi, let's decentralize everything world. And then obviously we don't think that the memes or the presidential coins were the easiest ways to scale sustainable value either. Maybe the Goldilocks just right is the stablecoin version that they gobble up and say that is the thing that we can get behind. Because I think ultimately crypto starting from this type of, I'll call it rebellious nature, to be something that eventually wants to be mass adopted, it can't stay a rebel forever. That's the reality, I think, of the ethos that maybe some of us were drawn into the space by. We need to understand as well that in order for it to be stable, sustainable, and have a lot of the power that it, I think, should to help people globally, it also needs to be respected by the big wings of the world. And whether that's via the ETFs, whether that's via new licensing, to have the rights to be able to have a new stablecoin in different countries. I think that that is going to be something that we see will make the market more efficient ultimately. I want to highlight an example that was brought up to me recently. That there is this concept of the kimchi premium still in Korea.
Yeah.
And the main reason why it exists is actually because the lack thereof a licensed KRW stablecoin. And so people on ramp by at least in those early eras, swapping first to just buy BTC and then getting BTC to swap everything else. And as you hinted at in the early days of the Poloniex era of exchanges, the biggest pairs, even when we were at Binance, it was still a 2018 was still a BTC era of
Yeah.
volume. And we saw the stablecoins really grow in terms of trading and liquidity in 2019, 2020, 2021. So I think moving forward, when you see still some of these market inefficiencies stemming from the fact that users don't have a freedom of choice to have these real world units of accounts, I think that is something that is a huge friction or barrier that we can still improve quite a ton. So yeah, I think that is definitely the name of the game for the next few years. Like who is truly able to uh, let's call it stay clean enough to get the support from the real world big guys, and who's also presentable enough to be able to get that buy-in, so that they can, let's say, I can't say Trojan horse. That sounds too nefarious here.
I know what you mean. I know
But
what you mean.
trying to get crypto into the hands of more users may need people to be
Yeah.
resourceful and pragmatic rather than being
Mhm.
idealistic of, oh, crypto needs to be only decentralized or only the certain flavor that got us into crypto years ago.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been thinking about this a lot. If you just tried to boil down like whether it's a chain or a token into like, what is the like promise made, promise kept of this thing? And there's so many examples I think of where even just from like a branding, marketing perspective or like a cultural perspective, we have these like little associations in our mind. Like you were saying, like the white picket fence. Like when you say those words, I know like just exactly what you mean. And even with Bitcoin, right? It's like the promise is like 21 million. And it's like that's just in your mind, you're like, it's like finite money supply. And it's like with a stable coin, maybe it's just like it's just in the name, it's like not gonna go up or down. It's just like trusted, stable. And I think there's like so many other, so if you take that and you ask that like of all of these other new things that we're creating, like it's like, well, what is the promise? I think like one of the things that Solana's done really well is increase bandwidth, reduce latency, right? It's very catchy. It just says like what they're trying to do. They're trying to make this one promise. And I talked to someone recently who was saying that, Solana and Bitcoin are both like intellectually honest in that promise that they're making. And I
Mm,
think what Ethereum's trying to figure out right now is like, what is that promise? Is it world
mm,
computer? Is it it's like infinite garden? But like, what does that mean? And that's definitely something I've been thinking about of like, how do we, not just like build better systems, or like you said, like increase liquidity to like a tokenized version of a real world asset, but like just like what is the promise, and like how ultimately boiled down it gets, for like regular people. Like it really has to be like a lot more simple than you think, because those of us who've been around this, we're like, we can go like so deep into like saying like, okay, well, this like, new chain token, like here are all the deep fundamentals. Like you and I are always chatting about this, and have like analyzed like so many different tokens. And then I think now I'm kind of realizing like, maybe we just need to like figure out what that like one promise is of the next thing, and how do you convey that. And then for builders, it's like, well, figuring out what it is you're trying to convey. Is it privacy? Is it trust? Is it sort of value? Like it's more important to focus on than I think I realized.
So I'll challenge you with one last question, and I'll challenge myself with the same question because I don't think I have the answer on the spot right now. But then what do you think is that one promise for Privy? And I think for me, I need to figure out what is that one promise for Impossible as well. Because I think if our promise isn't clear, it's actually a lot harder to convince all of our users to come and use our products.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think for us it grows into identity. Um, but I think it's definitely something I'll take back to the team, and would love to hear obviously our founders like Henry and Asta think about that, and for you as an impossible. And also you gotta take those baseball cards and like put them on Courtyard or something, make them NFTs.
Yeah, maybe I need to get all of these, all getting some royalties and getting some, maybe NFT lending is gonna come back. Maybe I can let people use these on chain somehow. I need to think more on the possibilities. Who knows? Maybe
Yeah.
we're gonna start seeing more NFT backed stablecoins at some point.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Interesting. I mean,
USDP for Pokemon card collateralized notes.
when are we gonna launch the stablecoin backed by Pokemon cards?
Good question. I guess let's find out which lawyer accepts just Pokemon cards as payment, and we'll figure that out.
Yeah, I know you kind of asked me in the beginning, like what was the reason for me joining Privy, and I like talked about this aha moment. And I feel like recently there's been a lot of exciting things happening, and I've like had some more of those like aha moments, and been like just thinking about what are other people's aha moments, because like for me, like just recently, to give you an example, there's like this app that's using Privy called BankerBot, and you can basically just tweet at the BankerBot and then send people tokens and like load up your wallet. And they're using Privy in a way that's really under the hood, so you don't even have to like set up an account. You can just be like on X, on Twitter, and you just tweet at the bot, and it like has a wallet for you under the hood, and you can kind of do stuff. And that for me was like a new aha moment. But I've been talking to a lot of people who have been, I would say, like in crypto for a long time. And, if their aha moment is like 6 years ago or something, a lot of people have said the first, like their last aha moment that they had in crypto was like making a transaction on MakerDAO, or like, basically like, taking out a loan, which obviously is still, super cool tech, but is not like the thing people are talking about now, and is not like new. And so I've been asking people this question of like, what was your last, most recent aha moment in crypto where you were like, this is a net new experience, or this is something I haven't seen before.
I love that. So I'm gonna now mention it this way, where the density of aha moments for in crypto for people is much more sparse, mainly because I think we have been able to have also the freedom, but also the, I would say, distraction level to do a lot of different things that may not necessarily elicit more aha moments for us as a space. But I think that probably the FDV of the market in the long run, as we get into a more mature market, maybe you can say an aha moment for people at a builder level is probably correlated to like, I don't know, 100 bill of TVL, or 100 bill of market cap value. If you can see that as a builder, and then you manifest that into the hands of, 1,000, a million, 10 million, 100 million users, right? There's probably some, let's call it aha to user, aha to builder and aha to user type of function that I think we'll write some formula on. But in terms of that, for most people, I think a lot of the builders that have lost a bit of their direction, they are very far away from that.
Mm-hmm.
And the question as builders is, how can we highlight or really give enough attention to these key things that are these aha moments? For me, I still think that the lending, liquidity provision, and options sectors are still something where an aha moment will happen. I don't think we're there yet. And there's a lot of these types of things where there's intersections of stuff where we like what's brewing and bubbling up is not yet fully cooked. And the question is, what are the things that will get cooked first? Or it's like those cooking mama games, like which dish is going to be finished so I can have to deliver it to these users. I feel like that's our constant stress level as builders, trying to find not only what is the aha moment or when it will happen, but then figuring out who to deliver it to in terms of our user bases. So I think I might have to use this as a survey moment of
Yeah.
what are, for everyone else that comes on the show in the future, what else is an aha moment, and when is your most recent one? Because I think
Mm-hmm.
how tired people are, or how disenergized some of my most respected builder friends I know, is probably very correlated with how many years
Yeah.
ago have they seen that aha moment for themselves. So I think, that will be definitely a challenge that I foresee, the optimism that we have towards, will there be a next cycle or a token go down, but our building doesn't stop types of
Yeah.
messages that I'm starting to tweet on Twitter because of the sentiment that I think the aha moment is a very tangible, measurable type of, are we really doing better as a space? And maybe, as you touched on with the regulators, maybe the stable coins is their aha to crypto, and that we have to be okay with everyone's ahas in that sense, and then just build around that to deliver something that everyone can get behind.
Yeah, I love that.
So we're gonna have the new, let's call it, the bottom is in, like the aha bottom is in. Let's figure out how to get more ahas for everyone.
Yeah. Yeah, I love asking people that, and I always get to like hear new perspectives and try out new apps and stuff. So yeah, would love it to be part of the pod.
It's gonna be our marketing team. I might need to petition and make it be the aha podcast.
I love it.
Yeah. Thanks, Jamie. I think we've covered a lot of ground and we're coming up on the hour now. So I just want to say thank you for coming on. And it was an absolute pleasure to cover everything from gaming to stable coins to all the things that Privy is doing behind the scenes to abstract experiences at an account level and as a user level that hopefully I never need to deal with. How do I get set up on this thing, right? Is the question that even my parents ask me whenever I tell them to do something on chain, right? That those frictions go away, and that then we can just focus on what are the experiences and the aha moments that we can create for users. So love all the things that you're working on, Jamie. Really appreciate you coming on early morning. And for the audience, Jamie's been sick, so been appreciative that she's got up early to share all of her insights with us. So thanks so much, Jamie, for all of the time.
Yeah, of course. Always happy to yap about these things, and really appreciate all of your thoughtfulness and just building in this space. And we're very lucky to have you be part of crypto and continuing to grow the space. So thankful for you.
Likewise for you. And I think it's with people that are never stopping the way they think to try to solve user problems. I think those are the people that, by surrounding myself with thinkers like you, that end up taking that thinking into action for the users, is very clear to me that there are a lot of people that are very not user centric in this space. I think slowly but surely I just need to tune out some of their influence or noise and just listen to those who I see are continuing to reinvent themselves in terms of what they actually deliver, but the core premises of why they build and the why the engines continues to run. I think I value so much more seeing builders like you that have brought that same level of consistency. As you said, in year 7, it's like the player that's still continuing getting all-star nominations throughout the career. That's a level of consistency where it becomes just class. It becomes just quality that's somewhat permanent on that sense. So Jamie, the respect goes back both ways to you. Thanks, Jamie. I really appreciate all the time, and happy have a happy rest of your week as well.
Yeah, you too. Thanks, Calvin.
Cheers. That's a wrap for this episode of Tech Around and Find Out. Thank you for tuning in and exploring the latest in crypto and blockchain with us. If you found value in today's conversation, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, or share the show with a friend. It really helps us grow. Thanks. We'll be back to unpack more market insights, talk with more game changers in the space, and keep you plugged into the most important developments in tech. Until then, remember, NFA. Nothing on this show is financial advice, so always DYOR, do your own research before making any moves. I'm Calvin, and this has been Tech Around and Find Out. Catch you next time.